pull everything down to one challenge. You have the challenge of making sure that every student gets every resource they need to succeed. You have the challenge of the maintenance of the buildings and keeping a health, safe learning environment for all the kids and staff. And I mean, I guess number one, you'd say all that kind of boils down to funding. We find it every year, there's more legislature talks of trying to cut funding or things aren't fully funded, specifically special education. The state is not fully funding that. And I think if we could get the state to fully fund special education, that would help the whole student environment as a whole, because extra dollars go to special education that could be allocated elsewhere in the district to help every student and not just certain departments. I think funding is our biggest challenge at this point. Funding also, when we're short funded, it also it's hard for us to relieve a tax burden on our community members when we need those extra funds to make this district a success.
Okay, I agree. Funding is probably the biggest challenge facing public schools right now, locally across Kansas and across the country. When funding is cut or when more money is diverted to voucher programs, it takes resources away from our public schools. That money supports our facilities, our students, and our staff. These shortages impact everything that we do. As a board member, I focus on using the budget wisely and tightening in ways that make sense. I'd also look for ways to bring new funding into the district through grants and creative community connections, and make sure we're building our reserves responsibly through careful ongoing budget review.
Do you support increasing public funding for public schools, even if it requires advocating for higher state or local taxes?
Okay, so I think I might have just touched on this a little bit. So yes, I do support advocating for more public funding. A very important thing to remember is that, in my opinion, the school district is the backbone of a community. Without a strong school district, your community can fall apart, because the school district is what brings people here. It creates a community feeling when you have everyone coming out to the ball games, everyone supporting all the fundraisers. I mean, sorry. I just feel that taxes are a huge issue right now, and it's extremely frustrating when some people you feel like have total support and have your back supporting your school district, and then others, it seems like the taxes are more important than seeing your kids thrive. My kids, your kids, the teachers, that is what our future is. And without supporting the schools and giving those kids what they need and the education they need, then not only Lansing as a community will fail, but the state and the nation as a whole. And I think that's a very important factor to remember. And I feel like I'm still paying my dues for all the money that was spent on me in education. So that's kind of how I look at it, is I'm paying my dues now for the money that was spent on me when I was in school for 13 years.
I absolutely support fully funding our public schools. That means advocating at both the state and local level to make sure our district gets the resources it needs. The legislature has a responsibility to fund education, including special education, and we need to keep holding them accountable for that. At the local level, the board's job is to make sure we're using taxpayer dollars wisely and efficiently. There may be times when maintaining a flat mill rate increases our overall revenue, but our goal should always be to keep taxes as low as possible while still maintaining high standards that our community expects of our public schools. The board has to advocate for our schools to the community while also listening to the needs of the community.
So I'm a taxpayer and I'm a fiscal conservative, and I analyze all the issues affecting our taxes. Everyone I discuss the issues with mentions the tax burden, as Jeff mentioned. The RHID discussion at the Board of Education meeting last night is a great example. But you know, people talk about the school district receives the highest percentage of your tax dollars, and that's true, but that's because our governmental leaders know that investment in education is beneficial for the community and beneficial for our future. I am equally firm in my position that public education is that investment to the community's future. Use of taxpayer funding must align with the demonstrated needs of our school district, and toward that end, the district needs a balanced budget that recognizes revenue must match the rising costs so we can continue to deliver the superior education in our schools. If a Board of Education chooses to change the mill levy or affect the tax dollars, then the board owes the community a clear representation of the shortfalls and why it may necessitate a tax increase, and show the plan for the expenditure of those dollars. And the Board of Education, as Jeff and Jackie mentioned, must ensure our district converts tax dollars into lasting investments in our classrooms, our teachers, and our facilities. But this approach requires continuous engagement with our community stakeholders to ensure a clear understanding of facts, the analysis, and the options available, to displace uninformed opinions that are formed on social media. Jeff's correct. When you look at the budget, particularly with SPED, we must focus on SPED, but then the state has to allocate the necessary funding. And when the state fails to meet its obligation under codified law, that puts the burden back on us. So at some point, you have to make a decision. Are we going to go ahead and move forward because our state legislature won't do so? We have to take that burden on as a community because we owe it to our children.
How would you support teacher recruitment and retention in our district?
Recruiting and retaining great teachers is identified as a board goal, and it's critical to the success of our district. The best way to attract and keep talented educators is to be the kind of district that people want to be part of. That means creating a culture that values collaboration, supports innovation, and makes teachers feel respected and heard. We also need to make sure our facilities give both teachers and students what they need to do their best work, and that our pay is competitive so we can keep the excellent educators we already have. I've listened to our district podcast, and I love to hear that we have a presence at college career fairs to recruit new teachers, mentor programs, and meetings that allow new teachers to share their experience and network within the district. I'm open to creative ideas that support our recruitment and retention efforts.
So simply stated, our teachers are the linchpin to educating our students through their years in our school district. Recruitment, morale, and retention are a direct reflection of our teachers' working environment. Negative rhetoric and fomenting a work environment which sow doubt of their professionalism and competence, ignoring the professional judgment and recommendations, and questioning their commitment to our children's education does not support the broader board goal. These assertions, without basis of fact, create a negative work environment where teachers and staff feel undervalued and professionally disregarded, and they adversely affect our ability to recruit and retain the best. The Board of Education must enable our teachers and staff and not undermine their ability to educate our children. The Board of Education must reestablish trust and a rapport with our vital district employees. Let's begin with respectful dialogue between the BOE and the teachers. Respect the fact that our teachers support of the LEA as their advocate and bargaining agency, and engage teachers through the district learning teams, leadership teams, for input of policies or actions that affect their profession. Respect is the foundation of that retention. We should call out attacks on teachers, defend their professionalism, and celebrate their successes. We should request an annual comprehensive climate survey, and then we should publicly address the results of that. We ensure that the district leadership teams have regular input through the superintendent, especially for policies and decisions, and ensure that we have fair, respectful negotiations with the LEA. Teachers are the linchpin. We must support them.
So as a current board member, I want to give a quick shout out to Sharon Burns and Miles Azza for the great job that I feel they do recruiting at all the college and career fairs. I think they've brought a very, very good selection of teachers to the district over the last few years, and I just applaud them over and over for that. I always try to give them a shout out when I can. One thing I kind of mentioned that maybe they could do is maybe take a board member with them on some of those. I mean, I'd volunteer to go, but I got a pretty busy schedule, but you know, it's always good for board members to make sure that they are showing the support to the teachers. And I feel like one thing we can do is to make sure that we have a strong mentorship program for our new teachers, because I know I'm not a teacher, I wasn't, but like I said earlier, I kind of went through the ranks, you know, getting thrown in the trenches. And I know how it would probably feel. It would be pretty overwhelming to be walking into a classroom full of kids when you're not much older than a kid yourself. So I think we have a pretty good mentorship program, but I also feel like there's probably always room for improvement. And I know we have some very educated teachers that have been here for many years that participate in that program, and I applaud you guys as well. It is seen. For retaining our current staff, I think the number one thing we can do is to listen. There's a lot of things that get said or get spoken, and I think the most important thing we can do is to make sure that we are listening and letting them know that they're being heard. No, we cannot address every issue or everything that is brought up, but I feel like it would go a long way if we can just let every teacher and staff member know that yes, we hear you and we appreciate your concern.
We have recently faced safety concerns in the classroom. How would you ensure school staff feel valued and safe in their workspace?
Yeah, so I've taught at the undergraduate and graduate level, and I know about classroom management and the difficulties I have with adults. The challenges our teachers face in the classroom, particularly at the elementary school and the formative years, are unquestionably difficult. Student behavior which detracts from the educational learning of our fellow students or impedes upon a teacher or staff's ability to perform their duties is incompatible with an effective learning environment. Further actions that inhibit potential or exhibit potential harm must require an immediate response at the school level. We have a policy, JCDA, that refers student conduct and behavior code, where corresponding consequences for those student actions. Anecdotal evidence suggests at least one school is experiencing an uptick in student behavioral issues. Children need a guiding hand that supports behavioral change, while also holding them accountable for their actions. Parents are a key partner in this effort, and they must be part of the solution. With parental rights comes parental responsibilities to address their children's behavior and misconduct at school. The SPED Social Behavioral Skills Program can also support these issues and concerns. I expect the superintendent and school leaders to enforce procedures that address student misconduct, to support the learning of all students, and demonstrate commitment to our teachers' well-being. Behavioral specialists and the building leadership teams are an integral part of that process, as well as professional development opportunities to help them learn how to cope with extreme behavioral issues. They're going to happen, but how we account for them and how we address them is important both to the student and to the well-being of other students and our teachers.
So as Greg mentioned, we do have policies in place to ensure safety, but the number one thing is to make sure that we're following those policies and that we're willing to enforce those policies. We also have many behavior programs in place, and I know recently over the last few years that it may seem like some of those programs do not work or are not working. And I think the most important thing we can do as board members is when we hear those concerns, make sure that we're asking the questions of why isn't it working? And if they're not working, then we need to be advocating for a change. Because like Greg mentioned, the policies are in place, but specific programs of how we follow those policies can be adjusted. And I think it should be a liquid program. It should always be changing to take care of the issues that are currently at hand. And also with safety, I've been a strong advocate for trying to get a second SRO for the district.